This is the BMW M240i, and like a lot of BMW cars that end in a 40, like the 440 and the 540, it raises a question. Do you really need a full-blown M car? The 2 Series is a fantastic package, and the range-topping 240i is just brilliant, despite its slightly awkward shape and proportions. And interestingly, it's the first BMW to be completely designed and manufactured in Mexico. From the front, you can see that this car is nearly as wide as the 3 Series. In fact, there's only about 7 centimetres in it, but it does have its own distinct look with unique headlights and also a regular kidney-shaped grille with slats that open when the engine is turned on. While Thunder Night Metallic is certainly an eye-catching colour, it's not one that I would choose personally, but it seems that I'm in the minority because I've had a lot of people stop and talk to me about this car today. It's a kind of a weird shape though, because it seems like the front of this car is doing one thing, and then at the back it kind of just gets a little bit short and stubby. It lacks the gracefulness of the 4 Series. The wheels are 19 inches. There's a couple of designs to choose from, but I think the standard rims are probably the best looking. You see, for me, the back is just a bit short and stubby, and that includes these light clusters here that are a cool design, but I prefer the wider, more graceful looking ones of the 3 and 4 Series. Twin exhausts down the bottom there make a pretty awesome noise, and the boot is actually pretty usable for a car this size. 390 litres, which is a pretty good amount of space. You can easily drop the rear seats from the remote latches here in the boot as well for more storage space. The 2 Series Coupé has almost a perfect 50-50 weight distribution, and that's largely because, well, half of it is engine. This is an enormous motor to put into such a small car. It's the same as the 3 Series and the 4 Series, a turbocharged 3-litre straight 6 that in this case outputs 285 kilowatts of power and 500 newton meters of torque, shooting to 100 k's per hour in just 4.3 seconds. Now, in some late-breaking news, BMW have just announced that the fully fledged M2 version of this car, which will appear in showrooms at the end of the year, will be the final M car that is purely internal combustion engine. All future M cars will in some way feature electrification, whether that be hybrid or fully electric. This year's M2 will be truly the last of the line. Despite this car having pretensions to be a 4-seater, it's really only been designed with 2 passengers in mind. That's the 2 at the front. I'm 190 centimetres tall, so I'm not exactly short, and I'm perfectly comfortable in here. There's plenty of room. It feels just like the 3 Series or the 4 Series. There's a decorative back seat, but there's not really very much to say about that right now. We'll come to that later. The dashboard is pretty much exactly the same as the 3 and 4 Series too. It's just like it's just been shrunk down a tiny bit. I mean, it's almost imperceptible, the difference. The layout of all the functions and buttons, it's exactly the same. So if you've been in one of those cars recently, you'll feel right at home here. The iDrive software on this car is the next to the latest version. It's not the newest one. You only get that in BMW's electric cars right now. And it's still really, really good. It's just the newer version is slightly better, but this is pretty awesome. It does have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, although I have again had connection issues with it this week, dropping out and just being slow to load. I'm not sure if the problem is my phone or it's the system at this end. I like to think it's not my phone. Climate controls just underneath that, which also work in sync with the screen. We've got the shortcut buttons down here, which you can program to whatever you want them to be. Underneath the aluminium door here, we've got wireless phone charging, which some more recent BMWs have unfortunately missed out on due to the shortage of semiconductors, but this car's got it. A couple of cup holders, a USB and a 12-volt outlet. We've got the jog wheel just next to that, which you can use for the iDrive system. You can either do it by touch or use the wheel. I never touch this wheel, it's just easier to touch, I think. Shortcut buttons for the nav system, a pretty standard gear shifter here from BMW, and all of your drive mode buttons of Sport, Comfort, Eco Pro and Adaptive. Good sized centre bin with a nice soft lid and blue stitching, which is featured all throughout the car. I actually quite like that. Head-up display on the windshield, and then we've got the instrument cluster, which has gone all digital for this car. I've had a few people tell me that they preferred the older analog dials, just because it gave it a bit more of a sporty feel. And look, I'm not mad about this setup either, because it's not very customizable, and just, I don't know, it doesn't feel very intuitive. Again, BMW have upgraded this for their electric cars, and I think it looks better there. The steering wheel, still big and chunky, and it feels even more so in such a small car. But it does have a nice feel to it, this wheel, despite its chunkiness with the leather stitching, and we've got some cruise control and audio buttons here, plus paddles to gear shift with. The leather bucket seats are extremely comfortable and they look nice too with this blue stitching. You can adjust them into any position you need to get them into. Plus there's adjustable bolsters and lumbar support. So for a long journey, this is where you want to be. It's very, very comfortable. Plus they are fully heated, not just on the bottom cushion, but all the way up, which is actually a unique thing. You don't see that in too many cars. The seating position, nice and low in the cabin. It feels really sporty, but there's great visibility out the front. Not so good in the blind spots just because those rear windows are so small, but the rear windscreen is actually quite large. So you've got good visibility there. And the wing mirrors are a little on the small side, but they'll do. One little design feature I really do like in this car, and that is the M-coloured insert here on the doors that actually light up and flash when the doors are open. Being a sporty coupe, we've got some nice big doors here with frameless glass. They look pretty good. So the back seat, yeah, this doesn't really work. In this lounge-like configuration with my legs on one side of the car and my body on the other, it almost works, but even then there's no headroom. So I don't know who this is designed for. You would have to be a very small child, I think, to actually be comfortable in here sitting behind me anyway in my seating position. But there is another design of climate control back here, so at least you won't be too hot or too cold. That's good. There's an armrest with two cup holders that I can't actually put all the way down. And another little storage thing here in the middle. Strictly a two-seater back here. I think it's more like half a person. There's no elegant way to get out of this thing. God, for a car that's not an M car, this is so good. When I picked up this car from BMW a week ago, I had just stepped out of the M4 competition coupe, and that car is just insane. It is nuts. And I said to my contact at BMW, oh well, you know, I've had my fun in the M4, time to quieten things down a bit in the M240i. And he looked at me and just said, oh, you can have a lot of fun in this too. And he wasn't kidding. This car is awesome. And it really does make you think twice about the necessity to get a full-on M car if you're looking for a nice car as a daily driver, because if you're not going to the track, then, you know, it's a bit of a waste. This does everything you need it to do around town. One thing that I'm really impressed with in this car is the engine note. It makes such a nice noise, especially considering it's not a full-blown M car. It only sounds a notch or two beneath it, actually. It doesn't burble or spit or crackle as much, but it's still really good. BMW love to put lots of drive modes into their cars. And now with the M cars, you not only get the drive modes, but then you also get customizable M modes as well. And here it's not too much different, actually. We've got Sport, Comfort, Eco, Pro, and Adaptive. But something that is a little bit different to the M cars is the difference between the modes. So for example, you put it in Sport Plus in an M car and you instantly feel like you're driving a completely different car that's almost impossible to live with as a daily driver. This one, the difference isn't quite as harsh. It's there, but you can live with it a bit more. Gear changes, especially when you're doing it manually, are super fast. This transmission is awesome. One minor thing I forgot to mention before when I was doing my review of the interior of the car is I am let down by a small thing, and it's the feeling of the buttons for the power windows just here next to me. They feel quite cheap and plasticky. For a car that costs as much as this one, I would have expected some nice metal buttons like we've seen in the M4, but no, here we've just got some fairly plasticky switchgear, which is a bit disappointing. In comfort mode, the steering actually feels pretty light and not too much of an effort to use, but in Sport Plus, it does feel artificially heavy and perhaps excessively so, especially when you're trying to maneuver at low speed. It's just almost tiring to use. 0 to 100 in the BMW M240i is officially 4.3 seconds, which looks and feels a little bit like this. That exhaust makes such a good noise. I am missing the sport dial configuration that you get on the M cars here. It just almost seems a bit disappointing. There's not a lot you can do with these dials. Unfortunately, they just really change colour depending on what drive mode you're in. It's a shame that you can't do more with them. So in many ways, this car feels like a bit of a gateway drug into the world of M cars, because if they represent 100%, then this one is pretty much 95. It does almost everything that those cars do, and everything you could ever want them to do on the road. If you're heading to the track though, go an M car, but anywhere else, you got it right here.